In a previous video, I showed you how I made sourdough liver, which is basically taking a bit of a sourdough starter, feeding it, and essentially creating like a branch of your mother sourdough. So I left that overnight and it seems nice and bubbly, and I'm going to be checking whether it's ready for sourdough baking. So I'm going to do flow test. Now, initially, you're gonna see me just pouring some of the sourdough starter in the glass, but that was silly of me because the correct way of doing flow test is to add water into a glass and then drop some sourdough starter to see if it would float. As you can see, it's floating, which is great. That's what we want. And that means I always do sourdough flow test before I start baking. Okay, so now the next step is to start mixing your dough. So I'm going to use very basic ingredients such as sourdough starter, water, strong white bread flour, and some salt. I'm using this plastic food storage box. I find that really great for sourdough baking. And so I'm gonna pop that onto scales and I'm gonna add all the liver I had, which came to about 200 nearly 230 grams of sourdough starter. And then I'm gonna add about 220 grams of filtered water. I'm gonna add some salt. I'm using just a standard table salt, so I'm gonna add about 10 grams of salt, and then I'm gonna mix everything really well. As you can see, sourdough starter just makes the water look very muddy, but that's fine. That's what it is. Now I'm gonna add 500 grams of strong white bread flour. So this bread flour, I bought a massive bag of 25 kilograms, and it's a very good quality flour. Okay, so all the four ingredients that we needed are mixed, and like I said, this is a very basic sourdough starter. So I'm gonna mix it all very well. How do you know if the sourdough starter dough is mixed really well? Well, you shouldn't have any dry flour left in a bowl. It should all be incorporated um, into a dough. So I mixed the dough as much as I could with my Danish hook, and then I'm just gonna jump in and start mixing with my hand. But one thing that I noticed is that there's too much of loose flour and the dough is already seems to absorb all the water. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna jump in and add about extra 80 grams of water, which makes in total about 300 grams of water for this sourdough dough. I really don't like adding water after main ingredients already been mixed because it becomes so sticky and is so much harder to incorporate an extra water. But this dough really needed some extra. So now I'm gonna just use a scraper. As I said, the dough is really sticky, and mainly because I added that extra water after initially dough was already mixed. With the help of dough scraper, I'm just gonna tidy up a little bit inside the bowl. Generally speaking, I'm not too bothered about it, but I thought since I'm filming, I'll make it nice and tidy. Now I'm gonna cover my sourdough dough and leave it to rest for 30 minutes where the gluten gonna relax. And this process called autolyse. So that will be relaxing, and I'll come back to it in about half an hour. I always try to keep my sourdough bread dough somewhere nice and warm where the draft doesn't reach it. And now the bowl is gonna go in the sink. I'm gonna add some water because otherwise, if this dough gonna dry in your bowl, it's gonna be really hard to wash up. So soaking is very, very helpful. Now, half an hour later, I'm gonna go back to my sourdough dough and have a look how it looks. I can see the dough has spread to the sides. That means the gluten has been relaxing, which is great. And now I'm gonna do the first set of stretch and fold. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna lift the dough up in the air and fold it back onto the center. And I'm gonna do that around the dough. Just keep turning my dough ball around it. This is a kind of a different way of working on your dough, such as kneading and sourdough. Um, dough will need a lot of gluten, and this is a way of just developing that and helping the dough. Now, you should never stretch to the point where the dough start breaking because that means the dough just can't handle it. So what I usually do once I've done my stretch and folds, I like to kind of form the dough into balls. So what I usually do, I lift it up and then fold it back. You don't have to do that, but I like making sure it looks nice and tidy and just start shaping that bowl. Again, first set of stretch and folds is done, and then I'm going to leave it to rest for half an hour. Then half an hour later, I'm going to come back again, and as you can see, the dough looks so different. And if you notice, I managed to lift the dough in the air so much higher. That means, and if I lift it up the dough, the whole dough kind of lifts together. That's really good. But I must say, this dough is really sticky, and it's a high hydration dough, which is not my favorite type of sourdough doughs. Right, I'm gonna leave it to rest again and then come back in about half an hour. As you can see, my dough ended up being resting for more than half an hour. But as you can see, big bubbles start forming, which is a really good sign. And what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna get the dough out of the bowl and I'm gonna do the so-called final shaping. So we will need Banneton basket, and I don't have much success with Banneton baskets, but I've got a little tip for those who struggle just like me. So what I do, I also find that quite hygienic way of using Banneton baskets. So what I do, I use cling film. I oil the cling film and then line up the bottom of the Banneton basket, and then I add another layer of oiled cling film on the top of the dough once it's already in the Banneton basket. That way I ensure that my dough won't be sticking to the Banneton baskets or the cling film. So what happened, quite a few times I've ruined my doughs because I use Banneton basket lining up where the cloth that comes in, and my dough would stick to the cloth, and that was just absolute disaster. And when you pull the cloth of the dough, and if it sticks to it, it kind of degasses and it just ruins it. So I had so much bad luck with it. So this is my way of doing it. Um, I'm a little bit ashamed because I trying to become this sourdough baking blogger, sort of a professional, and I can't even kind of use uh Banneton basket properly, but I found a way that works for me. And like I said, these high hydration doughs can be very sticky. Right, so Banneton basket is ready, and now I'm gonna do this final shaping. So what I'm doing, I'm just lifting dough in the air and trying to shape a bowl, and it's not good when the dough is breaking like this. You can you can probably see it, the dough is turning into a little ball, like it's like air inside, and it's almost bouncy, and um, that's a very good sign. Okay, I'm not able to shape particularly well this dough, so I'm just gonna put that in the balancing basket, and I'm gonna add this oil, one side oiled top, and this will be left on the side of my worktop to rest for about an hour or so. After about an hour, I realized how soft this uh, dough is, and I realized that I will need to leave that in the fridge to ferment. Now, let's go back to our sourdough starter. So, I wanted to check what is happening, and I am so happy. That looks really good, and I'm gonna do another flow test just to check if it's floating, which it is. And now I'm gonna test a new recipe. So I'm using Emmer, which is one of the ancient grains. I've never used this flour before, so I'm not particularly familiar. I've done a bit of research, and I have a recipe which I kind of looked online, ChatGPT, and now I've got recipe idea what I want to do, but I have to test, and it doesn't always come out the first time well, so I have to do the testing. So on the top of the scales, I'm gonna add a bowl, and I'm gonna add all the sourdough starter that I had in my jar, which came to about 180 grams. It seems very watery, but it's nice and light, so that's what we wanted. But my sourdough starter jar is completely empty, but that's fine. There's still a few bits left. We're gonna feed it well. It's gonna work out. Now I'm gonna add some filtered water, and it comes to about 300 grams. I'm gonna mix it all. And then we're gonna add 200 grams of Emmer flour. Now, I'm not entirely sure how this flour gonna work. Different flours absorb water differently, stickiness, the gluten and everything. So I'm literally experimenting and trying things out. I really like the color of this flour. It's kind of orangey brown. So Emmer flour is mixed in. Now I need to add our next ingredient, which is a strong white bread flour. I'm gonna add 300 grams, making in total 500 grams of flour. Now you might ask, why am I using or mixing these two flours together? So breads, not to make bread too dense, you need some gluten. And modern bread flour has more gluten than these old grain flours. So again, I'm going to experiment and see how it goes. I might need to reduce, if it doesn't work out, I might need to reduce one of the flours and increase the other one. I'm going to add about 10 grams of salt. And once that's done, I'm going to mix it all together to complete my dough mixing. I must say, I always think it's much better idea to mix flours together with the salt and then kind of mix it up and then add into your bowl. But I must say, I've completely forgot about it. The dough seems quite dry, and I already wonder if I needed more water to be added into this dough. So I've managed to combine all the flour and it just doesn't feel right, this dough. But again, I'm using new recipe and I'm gonna try to knead a little bit and shape the bowl. It's great that it shapes so well, but we're not making any breads like such as sandwich breads, so it just seems too easy. um but what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pop this dough into the bowl. I'm gonna oil a little bit the top to add extra moisture, and I'm gonna cover that up and leave it to rest for half an hour again, alternates. Let the gluten start relaxing, and then we're gonna come back and have a look what's happening with it. So I'm gonna quickly jump into my notebook and adjust the measurements I've just done, and making sure I write this down. Otherwise, I always think I'm going to remember and I never do. Now, let's go back to our sourdough starter. So I use pretty much every single bit of my sourdough starter. There's a little bit left in the jar and that's perfectly fine. You just need a few little bits. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to feed my sourdough starter really well. I'm going to add a couple of spoons of strong white bread flour and my little secret ingredient that I've been using lately, which is acorn flour, which is the oldest flour in the world. How amazing is that? I'm gonna add some water. I am not measuring. Measuring doesn't work for me. So I'm just gonna mix it all, and it seems like fairly good. I mean, it's a thick pancake batter, which is great. So I'm gonna close the lid and let it rest overnight. Now let's go back to our Emmer dough. It's again, it doesn't look great. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add an extra 50 grams of water. I do not like adding extra water once the initial dough has already been mixed in, but it is what it is. So I'm just gonna try to squeeze that water in. And you might think, what's the big deal about it? I find that it takes a lot of effort to get that extra water absorbed by already mixed dough. So I'm just gonna keep squeezing, 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 and though it's quite elastic, and I just doesn't it does just doesn't feel like it wants to take that water in, and that's a little bit annoying. In the end, I think I managed to incorporate that extra water quite well, and now the dough will be left to rest for another half an hour. So I'm going to cover that with a cloth, and I'm going to go back to my notebook and adjust the measurements again. So what I've done, I've added an extra 50 grams of water, and now I need to adjust that in my notebook. Okay, so we've rested our dough. Now let's have a look how it goes. So I'm gonna do stretch and folds, and I can already tell that the dough has quite a bit of gluten because I'm able to lift it quite high, and it feels quite elastic. The dough actually looks nice and smooth, and it's looking pretty good. So all these recipes I'm testing eventually will go onto my blog, yummysourdough.com. I've got lots of different recipes, and I focus a lot on Asian grains such as rye and acorn and now Emmer and Quran. So I'm gonna cover dough with cling film, and because it's quite late in the evening, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pop that in the fridge and leave it to ferment overnight. um, I've also got the other bread still in the fridge, which I'm also gonna leave overnight, and I'm gonna bake the next day. So I'm hoping for more exciting video for you to see the next day. Until then.